Well, hello, and welcome to our continuing devotional. We're currently in Philippians chapter 1, and we're going to be picking it up at the very end of verse 18. There's kind of a weird verse break there, but at the very end of verse 18, there's like five words that lead into verse 19. So here's what it says in the very end of verse 18. Yes, and I will rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance, as it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but with full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death. So Paul had just got through talking about how even though he was in prison, he was rejoicing that Christ was being proclaimed, even though some of that proclamation was by phony people who were self-seeking and not sincere. He says, as long as people are getting saved, as long as the gospel is advancing, as long as Jesus is being glorified, I can rejoice in that. But then he gives another reason to rejoice. In verse 19, he says, yes, and I'm also going to rejoice in this. Verse 19, for I know that through your prayers, the prayers of the Philippi Christians, and through the help of the Spirit of Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance. So Paul says, I'm not only rejoicing in what's going on outside these four walls and how God's kingdom is advancing, but I'm also rejoicing because I fully expect that as you pray faithfully for me, and as the Holy Spirit indwells me and strengthens me, this is going to turn out for my deliverance. Now, Paul's in jail, and it would be very natural for us to read the word deliverance here to mean, oh, I'm going to get out. But that the context doesn't fit that, particularly if you were to read down a few verses. Paul does not know whether he's going to live or die. He doesn't even know if he's going to get out or stay in prison. He will address both those things and that uncertainty in the next few verses of this chapter. So when Paul prays for my deliverance, it's the same word that's used for salvation. And he's talking about how God's going to give him the strength through their prayers and through the Holy Spirit. He's going to deliver me in the sense he's going to enable me to not give in to the pressure and the fear, but to stay faithful to Christ under duress. Because Paul's a human being like us. And you know how it is. Whenever there's pressure and there's threats, and there's a real price to pay for staying faithful to Christ, and it could cost you your freedom, your life, your reputation, your job, your relationships, your social standing, the approval of others. When there's that real, tightening of the screws in our flesh alone, we might just say, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to compromise. I'm going to kind of try to be like a politician, try to find a way to not offend anybody. But Paul says, because the Holy Spirit's in me, because you're praying for me, I'm confident this is going to turn out for my deliverance. And that's why he says in verse 20, it is my eager expectation and my hope that I won't be ashamed at all, but I'll have full courage, as always, that Christ will be honored in my body, not dishonored by my words, even if that means life or death. That's what, notice he says in verse 20, he says, I may have to die for this. I may not make it through this. He will say a little later he doesn't think that's going to be the case, but he doesn't know for sure, for sure. He says, I don't really know how this is going to turn out, but I do know this, that God's going to give me the strength, and as you keep praying for me and the Holy Spirit fills me, I am not going to be ashamed of Jesus or his word or his truth, but I'm going to have the courage to stand boldly no matter what the consequences may be, that God will be honored with my words, honored in my body, whether by life or by death. And I hope that you and I have that same kind of mindset, particularly as we're increasingly in a culture that is espousing and inflicting consequences. Maybe not execution or martyrdom, but there's certainly consequences now for standing up for truth, for standing up for Jesus. There's always been consequences, but now they're greater than before. Now they're more widespread than before. And so our hope, our confidence, our prayer and our reliance should be on the Holy Spirit to do the same thing that Paul said, that we're not going to be ashamed at all. We're not going to compromise. We're going to have full courage to stand for truth, no matter how unpopular that truth may be, so that even though we may lose out fiscally, financially, or in socially, as long as Christ is honored. That's what matters. And I hope that's what matters to you, and I trust that it is. I hope you'll consider these things. Have a blessed day.